There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Hello again, everyone. I'm Eli's dad with Project Eli, where we educate, lead, and inspire. And today I want to talk a little bit about thoughts being things, and I want to talk a little bit about what is seemingly coincidence, which may or may not be, and just to kind of like get you to think a little bit. Now, a couple of days ago, I did a video about how short-sighted we are, that we don't have vigilance, that we don't have the discipline to maintain social distancing, all the things that everyone's talking about. And that's the reason why this thing is just, this COVID-19 is just exploding in our society. And as part of the story, I was using my Uncle Jackie and told a little story about how he and I were at a wedding, and we had a dialogue, conversation, kind of amusing. And I hadn't really thought about my Uncle Jackie for quite some time. He and I mean, he lives on the East Coast. I live in the middle of the country. He's very old, and there just wasn't a lot of communication. I would give him a phone call every now and then, but I hadn't really spoken to him in quite some time. And this method of making my point just came into my head, and I said, let's use it. It's an amusing story. I think people will enjoy listening to it. And then later that afternoon, after I had made the video, I got a phone message from my sister that Uncle Jackie had a stroke and was very near death and has since passed on. And it was just, and I called my sister back. I told her, I listened to the message. I told her, I said, I just made a video this morning on my channel using Uncle Jackie. And she said, oh my goodness, wow. And it's just sort of a ooh type deal, but it's not really the first time that this has happened. I'm sure it's happened to a whole bunch of other people, not just me, not just my family. But one of the more famous episodes in American history is the story of Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Now, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, originally bonded with the Revolutionary struggle. Keep in mind, I'm an American history major, so this stuff really interests me. And they bonded together, but they were kind of on opposite sides of the totem pole, where John Adams was a Federalist, somebody that believed in a strong central government, and Thomas Jefferson was a states' rights advocate who believed that government should be as local as possible on every possible challenge that comes up. So they had kind of opposing points of view, and they became somewhat enemies. They certainly respected each other, but they became enemies, and it started in 1796. They both were running for president against each other. They had both served in Washington's cabinet, Adams as the vice president, and Jefferson, I believe, was the Secretary of State. And they had major opposing points of view, and they both ran for president against each other in 1796, and Adams won by, I believe, 3 electoral votes. And the way the law was written at that time, the way the structure of our society was, the democracy was at that time, was the person with the most votes was president, and the person with the second most votes was vice president. So Thomas Jefferson became Adams' vice president, which made for sort of a volatile mixture when the two got together because they had such opposing points of view. As a matter of fact, then they ran against each other again in 1800, and this time Jefferson won. And after Jefferson won, and they had changed the law, and Jefferson had, and that election was in dispute because anyway, I won't go into that, but anyway, Jefferson had his own vice president. That election was thrown into the House, and Jefferson won. And they didn't speak with each other for 12 years. 12 years. And then Benjamin Rush, another signer of the Declaration of Independence, kind of put a letter out to each of them and said, you know, the other guy, he wants to talk to you. And they both kind of fell for that, and they started corresponding, and they wrote over 185 different letters to each other, back and forth. And this is after, of course, you know, like I said, 12 years they didn't speak. So they were both out of the political limelight. And what's really interesting about it is that they, you know, became, to use the common term, frenemies. All right, they still had opposing political points of view, and they would go back and forth with each other, but in a friendly way. They were kind of out of the loop somewhat, but still they went back and forth with each other, and letters took a long time to go from one place to another, and they became very close, very close. And here's the ironic thing, is they both died on the same day, and that day was the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Woo! All right. So my point is that thoughts are things. You know, I hadn't thought about my Uncle Jackie in a real long time, and these two guys, you know, were, you know, somewhat enemies with each other, and they became friendly enemies, and strange things seem to happen. There's more, you know, in heaven and earth than is dreamt of in your philosophy. So keep this in mind with circumstances that go on in your life. Sometimes there's, you know, the infinite planner, the infinite mind has different plans for us that we cannot foresee. Certainly this COVID-19 thing that we're struggling with right now is something that nobody could have predicted, but we need to respond to it, we need to react to it, and we need to become frenemies, people that maybe have a different opposing points of view, but people that work together. And that is something that, when you take a look at the landscape, seems to be omitted at a great deal. I mean, everybody can't wait to slap the other guy. I mean, Trump can't wait to slap the Democratic mayors. The Democrats can't wait to slap Trump. The point is, all right, it took a long time. We're starting the thing with the masks. All right, now he's saying, all right, let's do the masks. All right, so let's move on. Let's move forward. You can't do anything about the past, but what you can do is you can work with the future. And right now, in my state, they just, at the beginning of this week on Monday, made masks mandatory in the state. And I said to myself, hoorah, finally. What that's going to do is it's going to create a consciousness that this is something that we must do in order to get the job done. The mayor of Miami has just increased the penalties for people that are not wearing masks in public. It increases the consciousness. Sometimes you tell your child to do something, and because of inspiration, and Eli, you know this for a fact, because of inspiration, the child will respond to it. But sometimes people, being obstinate by nature, they need to be persuaded other ways. Now, when you're a young man, Eli, that persuasion, that communication sometimes was my hand to your backside. Wasn't one of my favorite things to do. I'm certain it wasn't one of your favorite things to receive. But sometimes when people are acting like children, they have to be treated like children for the greater good. For the greater good. Just as you don't let a child walk across the street, look both ways, hold my hand, that type of thing. If the child goes across by himself, you punish the child. He says, but I was okay, I didn't get hit by a car. It's the wrong thing to do. You need to be punished about that so you won't do it again. That's the type of consciousness we need right here, right now. And because we will never end a meeting on a philosophical note, let's all get out there and woo, charge! I'm Eli's dad.